Okay, another ism, expressionism. And for this, we're going to first turn to Schoenberg, Arnold Schoenberg. If you think I'm jumping into tone rows right now, you're wrong. I will get to tone rows, but I'm not quite ready to do that. What is expressionism, though? I feel like I can't really do any better than to quote to you from the words of my Eastman teacher, Robert Fink. So we're going to look at this expressionism. Expressionism, as its name implies, was a strong reaction against impressionism and symbolism. Remember, it's like we're turning away from something. The crucial distinction, expressionism versus impressionism, is embodied in the name shift. Instead of distorting representation to give a more accurate impression of outer reality, the representation, that is the music, was distorted to express an inner psychological reality. So we're not saying, here's reality out here, what is the impression of light on my eyes or the impression of my senses? But I'm inside here in my head, I need to express it to you. Every other feature of art, Dr. Fink said, was sacrificed in favor of naked, direct expression of intense emotional states. Intense emotional states. You say, oh, that's just like primitivism. It's not going to be quite like primitivism. This is not about prehistoric, nameless forces. This is actually, expressionism turns out to mostly be autobiographical. It's about someone. It's one person's inner psychological reality. In fact, he goes on to say, unlike Fauvism and Cubism, which I may talk about another time, those two styles celebrated the non-human. Expressionism was an anguished first-person protest against all of that. An attempt to wake up the less and less human beings who were being mechanized by industry and capitalism. We're going to look later today at what we could call neoclassicism, which shows that allure of ever more industrialized and mechanized human beings. So we say, no, you're becoming like a machine, a robot. You don't have any emotion. You need to let it all out of your head and express the inner scream. Ah! That's what you need to do. By the way, the expressionist painting, the scream, same style period. It's expressing, if you look at the painting, I'll pop it up here on this video, I think I can. If you look at the painting, it's not an actual depiction of where the sky is. This painting is not a depiction of somebody on a Norwegian beach. Instead, the painting is showing the guy's inner anguish, this raw hopelessness of screaming. It's affected the way he perceives, the way we perceive the sky and the ground, and it's pretty horrible. Like we're looking through somebody's mind out at the world. That's how this music is going to work. One manifesto, a pamphlet put out by expressionist theater people was called Man in the Center. That kind of says it all. This is all human-centric. If you think about primitivism, it's not human-centric, it's big nameless natural forces, maybe humans, animals, doesn't matter who we are. It's all the same. This is the human inside, one human. Expressionism in music is inextricably linked with three German composers known as the Second Viennese School. This is one of those things you got to know, blind, drunk, or asleep. First Viennese School, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, thank you. Second Viennese School, Schoenberg and his two students, Alban Berg and Anton von Webern. Yes, they take us into serialism and atonal music, but I'm not heading there yet. I'm stopping on this side of it when we're talking about expressionism. Expressionism will lead us to atonality in a couple ways. Here's how we are going to get from this inner scream to atonality. An emphasis on direct and total expression leads composers to leave out all parts of music that were not considered expressive. Sonata form, not expressive. Structural cadences, not expressive. Symmetry, what is that? How is that showing your inner scream? All we need are things that show the inner scream. What is left to concentrate on? Well, we talked about this a little bit with Salome. We're concentrating on not the normal inner self that is adjusted and balanced. We're talking about the inner self that is in distress, that is varying from the normal, if you will, that is perhaps insane or on the way to being insane or obsessed with something. Take that and stick it with musical things. So the normal is tonal. We want to focus on the abnormal, if you allow me to use that stigmatized word. We are going to focus on and I use it because historically that's how they were looking at it. We're looking at the abnormal. Therefore, we should look musically at things which cause dissonance, chromaticism, stuff that needs to resolve in obsessive, strong, bizarre ways. But we don't care about any of the resolution. It's the expression itself. It's that tension itself that we focus on. Therefore, we throw out the resolved consonant stuff. Does that make sense? We focus with the dissonant stuff, and we throw out everything else. Schoenberg is going to call this the emancipation of the dissonance. The emancipation of the dissonance. I have more to say about that, again, under another heading. But Expressionism essentially strips away consonances and that need to resolve. Here's the other thing that Expressionism is going to do, and this is where it's really important for today's music. The need to depict complex and multi-level psychological states. The need to depict really complex stuff in somebody's head led composers to fill their music with a hidden but unified motivic structure. There is something in there that unifies it all. Whether that's the hidden urge to marry your mother or to eat a tree or the hidden urge to whatever. You can't see it, but it unifies your behavior. The reason you beat somebody up is because you had this urge that says, I need to be better than everybody else, so I beat this person up. Okay, now take that musically. We need, if we've taken away symmetry, sonata form, cadences, dissonance, consonance pairing, if we've taken all that away, what's left? How do we organize the music? If you say, maybe we don't organize it, I'm sorry, you are about 50 years too soon. Come back in the 1960s. We'll be there in just a couple short weeks. No, instead we say we have to organize the music somehow, but we don't want that to be obvious because that gets in the way of expressing the hidden emotion. So we use hidden or apparently hidden motives, a motivic structure. It's like Strauss melodies that were full of little motivic bits chained one onto another. And like Stravinsky's melodies that are little bits of motives chained one after another. But now that motivic structure is all of the organization. It provides what we might call harmony, although not in the tonal sense. It provides melodic phrases, if we want to call them phrases. It provides all that we need. But it's not related to consonant dissonant. It doesn't, that distinction is meaningless now. Okay. Let me just look. Of course, she's picked the one place to sit that I need to actually look. Come on, just let me look at these notes. Okay. One of the pieces I'd like you to listen to, which I believe is in your anthology, is the final scene of Erwartung of Arnold Schoenberg. And I'm going to keep going here with my professor's notes because I can't really say it any better. You remember Salome, kissed the head of the dead guy, right? Strauss's Salome was, for Strauss, just a little slice of time when he was sort of avant-garde. And he very quickly, after Salome and Electra, became sort of old guard. Schoenberg picks up from where Salome left off, if you wish, and sort of takes it to the next extreme. If Salome toys with the edge of obsession and slips over the edge for a horrifying moment just before the end when she's trying to talk to the head, why will you not respond to me, Joe Cannon? Why do you not look at me? Well, because he's dead and his head is there on a plate. So Erwartung by Schoenberg plunges headlong over the edge into insanity and atonality. The point the thing you should remember is at this moment in musical time, in musical history, atonality represents insanity. Atonality represents insanity. Schoenberg's protagonist, a female protagonist in this sort of weird sort of work, this little opera-y thing, is called the woman. That's all she's called, the woman. She has no other identity because she's really the id. She is just a raging desire, ungoverned by cognitive thought, the woman. We could also say perhaps she is the surrogate for the composer, I guess. The protagonist, the woman, is the logical successor to Isolde and Salome. Isolde, Salome, the woman. Now she is completely and clinically insane. She exists in a landscape that we could say an expressionist landscape. It's hard to say what is real and what is not real. It's all shadows, strange clutching trees and dead bodies. Really, really creepy and not outer real. It's inner real. Which it's actually, I mean, we see this all the time now in movies and on TV, right? This is sort of one of our TV movie threads. So this landscape that the woman is showing us, generally we would assume, or we would think, and I think it's true, that what we're seeing as the landscape is a twisted projection of inner anxiety and drives seen through her mind. We're looking at this just like the Scream is looking, the reality that we see is filtered through that. Sorry, I have to do that when you say the Scream. He writes here, Erwartung is probably the purest piece of musical expressionism ever written. The purest piece of musical expressionism ever written. Not only tonality, but form, theme, even motivic development have been sacrificed. So we've gotten rid of tonality, form, theme, even motivic development has all been thrown out, sacrificed to create a web of shifting, loose associations. It is a chaotic stream of consciousness. We're listening to everything that's going on through here, no filter. Filter off, we're listening to it all, and it's stream of consciousness of someone who is not sane. I see here the librettist, Marie Pappenheim, was a cousin of one of Freud's first patients of hysteria. So all of the psychoanalysis stuff, it connects really obviously. It's kind of hard not to connect that with what's going on in Erwartung. Because the librettist, connected with Freud. Think about the last scene of Erwartung, and you need to listen to it. Schoenberg had actually seen the premiere of Salome in 1906. By 1909, he's writing his own version, in a way, Erwartung. The end of Salome and the end of Erwartung, the last scene of Erwartung does kind of evoke Salome's last scene. It's got some gestures. It doesn't ever quote a theme. It's not that obvious because we've thrown out that kind of stuff. But things like woodwind trills, some of the gestures seem familiar. And that if you think about that final horrific scene in Salome, it took Strauss a whole opera to lead up to it. He gave us the growing obsession of Salome, the reasoning of John the Baptist's resistance, Herod's dismay and fear of her, all of that, and then the aftermath. Schoenberg dispenses with the whole preparation and with, if you will, the resolution, which is, isn't that what we do tonally? We prepare a dissonance, we have dissonance, and we resolve it. Schoenberg says, get rid of all that. Emancipate the dissonance from its two preparation resolution shackles. He does that for the whole opera. And essentially, he crams more expressionism, or more expression and psychosis into that whole final scene. His whole opera is a fifth the length of Salome. It's packed, it's concise in its way, and it's just, it's not, how did we get to that point, or, oh, now it happens. It's just this inner scream. That is, I guess, a supreme example of the stripped down aesthetic of early Expressionism. Now, let's turn to the other Schoenberg example that you have, and that is the Opus 21, Pierrot Lunaire. And that's from 1912. So only 3 years later, after Wartung, Schoenberg has already realized that the formlessness of Expressionism is difficult to sustain. That human beings perceiving music or art need some kind of organization. If you say, well, no organization, let's have no organization, you're a little bit ahead of the game. That's going to be the 1960s, 50s, 60s. We'll get there in a couple short weeks. But Schoenberg says, well, what can I do instead? I can't use musical form. I've thrown that out. I can't use harmonic progression. I've thrown that out. Or key area. That's all gone. He has to turn to something else. And in Pierrot Lunaire, he turns to the structure of the words, the poem, because this is a song cycle. So it is a poem. As he says, it's a series of poems. It's a 7x3 set of poems. Why didn't he just say 21? Because 7x3 implies a structure within the number 21, right? It's organized into 3 sevens, or 7 threes, in this case 3 sevens. Okay, so he's imposing, the poetic structure is going to impose order on chaotic music. Well, orally chaotic music. Pierrot Lunaire sets us in an old setting of a landscape with the characters of the Commedia dell'arte, the Italian Commedia dell'arte. Pierrot is in love with Columbine, beautiful dancer, who is seduced and in love with the ever popular Harlequin. And poor Pierrot is left out in the cold. And in this case, Pierrot is a little insane. More than a little insane sometimes. This is an expressionist view of Pierrot, who is perpetually the disappointed lover. So things are a little cracked. This moonlit landscape, Pierrot Lunaire, moony Pierrot, moon-touched. The idea that the moon causes you to go insane. And so this whole landscape seems to be in moonlight. And it's sort of a fractured, twisted landscape, kind of Tim Burton, actually. And there is a certain amount of the occasional dark, bitter irony that we see in Tim Burton stuff in Pierrot Lunaire. It's a little harder to hear it and see it, I think, for a modern audience, but it's actually essentially the same. And that's because already Expressionism has evolved. It's taken a step back from the primal scream to now, well, yeah, boy, we're all crazy together. Isn't that kind of funny or not really funny? So that's kind of where we are. Let's see. Yeah. As I say, Schoenberg took one way out of the formalist or the expressionist dilemma of not having form. The structure of the poems organizes the piece. The macro structure is that there are 3 big parts, 7 poems per piece, and each poem if you look carefully at the poems, which I think they're printed in your anthology, I would hope they would be, each poem has an intricate repetition of lines. Each poem has sort of refrains to it. And so the music can rely on those poetic repetitions as a sort of structure. There are two things to pay attention to. We hear as one of Schoenberg's sort of characteristic devices, which is Sprechstimme, speech singing. It's actually like an autotuner. Now that I think about it, an autotuner, if you turn it up full, produces speech singing. It is like I am singing, but I am speaking. I am speaking in a high voice, or if I pitch my voice lower, I can't even find a note. It's creepy because it's neither how we sing nor how we speak. Sprechstimme is potentially meant to imitate or to make use of, not imitate, but make use of the way an insane person, again, I'm using these terms in the sort of old 20th century sense, the way an insane person might have an affected speech pattern, that their sense of vocal tone is flawed. And so they would say high things which are important and low things which are not important. I mean, it's creepy to a sort of average listener because it's not okay. It's disturbing to watch somebody's mind who is fractured. That is the sense of dislocation, I guess. So Sprechstimme is a pretty consistent, useful device. By the time it's used in Pierrot Lunaire, it's almost like Schoenberg is mocking himself. Here is Sprechstimme, and it is so funny. Aren't you glad I invented it? It's a bit, it's a self-mocking kind of a thing. In a way, you could say it does what recitative used to do. It gives us the emphasis of the text, and yet at the same time sketches a melodic shape. It's just kind of a disturbing way to do it, perhaps. The poem Mondvlek, the song Mondvlek in Pierrot Lunaire. This is one of the neat songs. I mean, they're all kind of cool. If you get past the unusual orchestration and you can deal with the absence of consonants, it takes, that's the other thing, it takes getting used to. And some of you may never be comfortable with it, but there are so many kinds of atonality that if you don't like this, just hang on and you may find one you like. You may never find one you like, but remember not to close your mind off just because it doesn't have a pretty 5-1 at the end, okay? So work hard to stay open in your ears that way. Up till this point, you have not had anything quite like this in your music history group of pieces. This is a whole different world here, and so you got to stick with it. You got to try. I don't say you have to like it, but you have to try. Mondvlek is actually pretty structured. It is a palindrome. It's kind of a complex palindrome, and it's got a certain amount of canonic structure. So again, remember, Expressionism wants to hide some of that stuff. If you don't notice the palindrome or the canons going on, that's actually okay. Remember, these are the drives and desires behind all of this.